And for more on Yoon Suk Yeol's impeachment, South Korea's pending election, and what's ahead for the next leader, whoever he or she should be. We're joined by Dr. Soo Kim, political analyst at RAND Corporation and former CIA analyst. Dr. Kim, earlier we were speaking to my colleague Grace Shin about what's happening in South Korea. And she said it's very hard to read public opinion. But what we do have, a Gallup career poll released last week showing 60% of South Koreans want Mr. Yoon to be permanently removed. Given this court decision, it is on those, at least based on this one poll, the best scenario we could have expected in terms of bringing the country together and healing divisions.
Yes, thanks for having me. That's exactly right. The public opinion polls have shown that most people wanted Lee out of the office, and the court ruling today definitely reflected that. Now, the next step is, of course, for South Korea to enter into a 60-day snap election campaign, which is pretty rapid. But given the pace of events and the course of events with politics these days, we've seen that we already pretty much have a opposition candidate solidly in front right now. So we're looking to see just how the elections are going to be played out in the next 60 days.
In fact, Grace is mentioning, she said he has support for Mr. Lee Jae-myung, that's the opposition leader, in double digits now, given his surviving his latest legal challenge. Is there anyone else from the ruling party that might pose any credible challenge to Mr. Lee Jae-myung?
So this is where the ruling party is going to be facing an uphill battle now, not just in terms of finding a candidate to rally around, but actually getting the people's trust to find a candidate where they could actually unite around. So we're seeing several names being circulated, one of which is Han Dong-hoon, who was the former justice minister and the former PPP leader. We also have the Seoul mayor, Oh Se-hoon, who's also thinking about running, and a couple other candidates. But if you look at Lee's popularity and where the PPP is right now, it's going to be truly a tough battle for them to find a candidate that is going to be able to counterbalance the Lee effect at this point.
Certainly very hard to do in 60 days. Of course, any leader draws strength domestically so that he can project that internationally. But if we look at just the international angle, and South Korea is in need of leadership right now on the global front, which party's candidate do you think might be preferred if South Korea wants to lean towards its traditional ally, the United States?
That's a tough question, because if we're looking at the traditional alignment of politics and parties, we would assume that it would be the PPP, given their pro-U.S. leanings, their typical support for the U.S. alliance. We do have to remember that Lee Jae-myung has shown to be a very pragmatic politician, which means that he will remain firmly, fixed into his political stance and his traditional views on North Korea, the United States, and China. But he's also expressed some indication that he might be willing to make some adjustments to his policies. So if we're looking at traditional politics, there's an answer. But if we're looking at the current state of South Korean domestic and foreign policy, there's whoever's going to be the leader will need to be much more pragmatic and much more able to think on his or her feet.
And it's not just South Korean domestic and foreign policy. The current global situation, we've just less than 2 days into these very harsh tariffs from Washington, of which South Korea was not spared either. The biggest challenge is right now whoever wins those elections, if they happen in early June.
Exactly, yes. And we're also looking at 60 days of campaigning, as well as the pro-Yoon supporters facing disappointment, and how they're going to be able to express that. Is that going to be through the vote, or is that going to be through repeated protests and demonstrations? So there's a lot for South Korea to unpack and a lot for South Korea to make amends with right now. And 60 days is a very short time for that.
A final question here. These elections, might that be the best thing to happen at this point, giving whoever wins, whichever party manages to do this, say it's the opposition leader, at least he does have a majority in parliament, so it will be easier for him to carry out anything legislatively, a clean slate, and at least some way to break the deadlock in South Korea's parliament? Final question.
That's very tough because, again, we're seeing South Korean politics extremely polarized right now. And just to say that because there's an elected leader that things are going to be back into its old shape, it's a very tough ask, I think, for South Korea. So whoever is going to be leader is not just going to be inheriting a clean slate, but it's a clean slate on top of the old drama that needs to be settled. And that is going to take, more than 2 months, I would say, for South Korea to actually find its, to get back on its feet again.
All right, so more turmoil ahead, if perhaps at a slightly lower pitch. Thanks for that. Dr. Soo Kim, political analyst at RAND Corporation and former CIA analyst as well.
Thank you.